Hello and welcome to Make a Little. My name is Taylor, and if this is the first time that I have graced your screen, and it probably is since this is my first ever YouTube video, I am a longtime crocheter, complete newbie knitter, and just huge lover of all things art and music. I have been watching knitters on YouTube for years now, long before I ever learned how to knit. This was my first full year of knitting. It was an extremely challenging ordeal for me to learn how to knit, and so this year really feels like the culmination of so much work and so much effort. I just really wanted to memorialize the things that I've done this year. So I'm going to take you through all of the projects that I completed this year. We're going to talk about the designer, the experience, the yarns I used, what I would do differently. Spoiler, it's a lot, and just sort of how I felt about each of these projects throughout the year. I have compiled a little bit of data, so I will pop up some graphics on the screen as I sort of talk through these pieces, and then just sort of conclude with, how I feel about my knitting this year, what I want to do in the next coming years, and how I feel like I can just sort of improve and expand on this craft. So with that, let's get started. So the first project that I'm going to share is actually not from 2025. It is very late 2024, and I was fully convinced that this was the first thing that I made in 2025. And then I looked back at my Ravelry page and realized that I had just completely misremembered, and this was completed right around the end of December. But this is a crochet blanket. I think it's extra chunky Bernat blanket yarn. There happened to be 6 full skeins at my Goodwill outlet, and so I just sort of crocheted this up. It's loosely based off of a free Yarnspirations pattern. I'll put the name down below here, but it's a very, very simple, just kind of crochet rib stitch here that you can see. This was actually so large that I had to use a mosaic hook to do it. I have just this massive mosaic crochet hook, and it was a lot of fun. It was very basic, but because I included it in all of my data, I wanted to make sure that I shared it. So the second thing I actually knit in 2025. I was actually on a flight to Tennessee to celebrate my best friend's birthday in January, and I finished this pattern, but this is the Wiggly Scarf by Helena Weiser. This was like an immediate love of a pattern for me. I saw it advertised on Instagram multiple times, and I was just so in love with how graphic and bold it is. You can kind of see the stitches a little bit more. It's just garter stitch with a really beautiful edging. And I say that it's just garter stitch with a really beautiful edging, but this was actually an extremely difficult pattern for me. I believe it's an 18 stitch repeat. I won't get too much into it because it is a paid pattern, but I found it really, really challenging to read my stitches in garter stitch. But it is, I think I would say it is a very simple pattern. It just, for a beginner, that selvage edge was a little bit challenging. So I love this. It's knitted up in just a big twist acrylic that I had left over from my crochet mania when I was doing a lot more crocheting. And I love this bright color. It's called Slime. This is a really graphic piece. I love bright colors. I love wearing really bold things. And so I actually get a lot of wear out of this, especially with outerwear. But it's just a really fun, neat little piece. I think it would be a great gift knit or just a great project to kind of keep on your needles that just takes a little bit more attention. If I were to do this again, I would avoid getting some of the stripes wrong, but you wear it tied up or just as a scarf and nobody's really gonna notice it. The next piece that I knit this year, this is actually a pattern. Sorry, I have an iPad here, so I'm looking at my list to make sure I get all of these designers' names right. But my next one was actually a pattern that I knit, I think, 5 times this year, and that is the Carmen Balaclava by Paula on Knits. This is a free pattern. on Ravelry that is just like a very, I would say, like fundamental, foundational balaclava, and I love this pattern. The original is just one color, but it's very easy to customize. I customized this multiple times. I actually knit one in solids in 2024 and love the pattern so much that I kept knitting it. It is, again, like I mentioned, it is extremely easy to modify, and so it's extremely easy to just kind of make your own. I'll try it on here. So you can see it's just a very kind of classic, beautiful balaclava shape. The edge is all knitted and then folded over and secured. This was just such an amazing project. All of my Carmen balaclavas have been really amazing projects for kind of figuring out how knitting works. You knit kind of the top shape first, and then you knit down until you connect in the round. And I just found it to be a really fun project to kind of experiment with some of my thrifted yarns as well. These are some kind of wool mixed with an Italian mohair. I will put the name down below, but I am almost certain that it is discontinued. And I actually picked that mohair up at an amazing booth at the Oregon Flock and Fiber Festival that was all secondhand yarn. And I thought that was really amazing. So this is super warm. I wear it almost every day when it's cold, especially in the winter, which it is winter here right now. I just really love this piece. I really love this pattern. Again, you won't actually see the other ones that I knit this year because they were all gift knits, but just know I really, really recommend this pattern. Okay, so my third piece this year was a very simple pattern. It was just, I kind of hit a slump with my knitting. I was having a hard time kind of feeling like the knitting mojo was there, and so this was great. This is just called the Scrappy Happy Hat. This is by Diana Solimasi, and this hat is very simple. It's meant to be kind of knitted up with whatever scraps you have. You've got some ribbing, and then the crown is very beautiful, basic little spiral. Again, this pattern is mostly intended for using up scraps. These were like partial skeins from some kind of fun, fancy acrylic that my sister gave me for Christmas in 2024. And just having it on, it's a pretty basic hat shape. You can see it covers my ears, but you can really kind of customize this one as well. This is another free pattern. I actually do quite a bit of free pattern knitting. I'm a huge fan of it, and I kind of think it helps you learn a little bit more because you have to trust your gut sometimes, especially if patterns haven't been tested. But this one was a really, really straightforward pattern, and I would totally recommend it for anybody looking to use up some stash yarn. So again, that is the Scrappy Happy Hat by Diana Solimasi. The next thing I knit was actually one of the first garments that I have ever knitted, and I was extremely happy with this project. I'll have to put some B-roll in because I won't be able to show it, but this is the Eterio by Susie Bridsong. This is a dress, little eyelet lace details where the stripes change color. This is another completely free pattern. Again, when I did my data metrics on this, I actually realized that the majority of the patterns I knit this year were free. And I am just so amazed by the generosity that knitters in this community have and how many knitters have some sort of free pattern. It's really fantastic. This, I would honestly say, is a perfect beginner project and a perfect beginner garment. It's very, very simple. You are basically just knitting the top and the back and then connecting them in the round and knitting just all the way down in a tube. There are some increases if I remember correctly, but it's very straightforward. The pattern is written beautifully. I believe that this pattern comes in quite a few sizes. I know even the models for this pattern come in a variety of sizes, which I really loved. This is knit up out of bamboo pop. This was some yarn that was gifted to me by my mother for Christmas last year. I love this yarn. It is so soft, it's so stretchy, it's extremely comfortable, and this is just like a perfect summer dress. I unfortunately haven't had the chance to wear it because I finished it in February the first time, but I completely screwed up the straps and I had to completely re-knit those from scratch, and I did not get around to that until maybe November of this year, so it has not been warm enough to wear it yet, but I will be taking a trip to New Zealand in February, and I am very excited to get the chance to wear this while I'm there. So the next piece is also a garment, and it is also a free pattern. This is the Heathered Haze cardigan by Maria Bergman. Maria Bergman actually has quite a few free patterns. And specifically, I believe that she works for a yarn brand that I can't remember off the top of my head. Sparta is maybe what it's called. I'll put the name down below. But her patterns are really beautiful. They feel very classic, traditional to me in a lot of ways, but very sophisticated. This was my first time steeking, so this cardigan is knit very traditional, sort of like traditional Norwegian construction. So you knit the cardigan top down as a raglan, you knit it as a tube, and then you steek the middle for the button band. I did modify my button band a little. I just did that kind of stockinette that I folded over into a brim because I won't lie, I was a little confused on how to do the button band for this cardigan. I tried a couple of times, and I'm going to chalk it up to me being a beginner because I know that Maria Bergman's patterns are really, really well written, and otherwise I had no issues with this at all. But I did have some trouble with the button band, and so I just kind of improvised because I really wanted this project to be done. This is also made out of thrifted yarn. This is fisherman's wool. I'll put the colorways on top because I can't remember them off the top of my head, but they're held double in this, and I think that's really beautiful because the color work that you see is actually, so you'll see you hold one color together, you hold the second color together, and then for these really gorgeous little stripes, you hold one of each color together. So you get this kind of heathered texture, I guess just like the name of the pattern. I will put this one on. It is incredibly warm. I am also a huge fan of this yarn. If I found it again in a thrift store, I would definitely purchase it. It is 100% wool. It smells really sheepy, which I know some people really don't like, but I love. Like, I love the smell of wool. And it is incredibly just insulating and warm. I think if you had sensitive skin, this might be a little scratchy. I personally don't have any issue with it, but as I knit more and more with wool, I realized a little bit more that I might have a pretty high tolerance for that kind of rustic scratchiness. But I really, really love this one. When I blocked it, you can kind of see the sleeves grew to just about right over bracelet length, and I really, really love the way that this one fits. Again, I'll put in some B-roll so you can actually see sort of the length of it. The next project I knit was actually with that exact same yarn. I had a little bit left over. These are the Kura mittens, and this is by Helena Jeronin. That's them. I currently only have one of these because I gifted them to my boyfriend because they're pretty big on me. That's my own fault. That's not the pattern's fault. But I have no idea where he put the other one, so it's just this one. I promise I knit two. But this is also a free pattern, keeping with the trend. These are really beautiful, really simple. I loved, loved, loved knitting these. I would absolutely knit another pair of these. And again, that's with that same colorway. The hope was to wear it as a matching set with the Heathered Haze cardigan, but obviously they're a little gigantic. So my boyfriend really likes them though. He has gotten quite a bit of wear out of these, and I really don't see any pilling, any real like loose threads or issues. So they've held up really, really well. I think that fisherman's wool is just kind of known for that. But huge fan, very cute, very fun project. The next thing I knit, another free accessory pattern. There was maybe a trend for me this year. I knit a lot of accessories, knit a lot of free patterns, but this is the Colette. This is by a pattern by Julie Hayes. This is a beret pattern. This is also made from some thrifted yarn I found. I do believe it actually had a yarn band on it, so I will put the name of that yarn down below. It's a really pretty yarn. It's purple, but if you look at it closely, you can see it's sort of got these like red and blue, pink occlusions in it, which I think is really lovely. I'll put this one on so you can kind of see it in action a little bit more. But yeah, so you can see it's a very classic beret pattern. I was really looking for a beret pattern, and I only had a little bit of this yarn, so it works really well. This is my first time knitting an I-cord because it does have a little I-cord stem on it. But this was also a very beautiful, very simple little pattern. I would totally knit another one of these again. I think that they're a great gift knit, and I just really had a lot of fun knitting this up. I think it only took me a couple of days, so it was really lovely, and I wear this one to work a lot. It's a really fun color, but it's also pretty subtle, so I really enjoyed that. Okay, next, I knit my very first pair of socks this year, and these are another free pattern. These are specifically the Rye socks by Tin Can Knits, and these are pretty basic stockinette socks. I can't quite remember the heel construction. I'll look it up and I'll put it down below for you. But they have this really cool like texture along the top. These are part of, I think, Tin Can Knits' Rye collection. So they've got a sweater pattern, they have the socks, I think there might be one more too, cardigan or something, but they all kind of feature this really pretty texture. I actually downloaded the Tin Can Knits knitting app for this. I had so much trouble knitting socks. I had tried and failed many times with socks. And so this one like takes you really, really basic, like holds your hand step by step, and that was what I needed. So I really, really appreciated that. These socks are great. I wear them relatively often, mostly around the house because they are a little thick, but you really can't see too much pilling on them or anything. I believe this is the Yarnalia Marvel yarn, which was a Joanne brand, rest in peace. But it's a yarn brand that I really enjoyed knitting with for these ones. You can totally see that I'm a beginner in these socks. Like, I think they're a little bit wonky shaped, and like the toe is a little not as neat as I would like them to be. But for a first pair of socks, I'm really quite happy with them. And they're really comfy. I love the color. I think it's called matcha. So very, very pretty and a very good time. Sorry, my eyes are a little red because I think I just inhaled some wool fluff directly into my throat. So this next one is a very special piece for a couple of reasons. This is the oversized vest by the Isako Noro design team. I believe this is an older pattern of theirs that they just now made available in English. Or at least uploaded to Ravelry pretty recently in English. I absolutely loved this pattern, and as you can maybe tell if you've been around the knitting community for a while, this is knit up in Noro yarn. This is specifically Noro Tensin, which is a wool silk blend. My partner had the opportunity to go to Japan this year, and when he asked me what I would want him to bring him back, this was a pretty easy decision. I honestly feel so honored and lucky to get to use this yarn. It is So beautiful. I gotta say, I like fully buy into the Noro yarn hype. It is, I will say, extremely fragile. I had this yarn break on me a lot, but I think that's because it's like almost, I don't know if it's recycled material, but it's almost like a composite yarn. Like you can actually see all of the different scraps that were used to make this. I think the color changing aspect of it is so beautiful, and I really wanted to knit it in a Noro specific pattern because I really just wanted it to shine as much as possible, and I love the way that this striped. I'm going to put this on again. I will show some b-roll of me wearing it so that you can kind of appreciate it a little bit more, but this is it on. And I really love this piece. I do wear this one actually pretty often. Wore this to a friend's birthday party. You can see it's got these really deep sleeves that I think are just really flattering over a turtleneck or over a long sleeve shirt or even just on its own. I did knit the actual neckband a little wonky. Like you can see I secured it maybe just like a little high or something. So it's not quite as oversized as the like original pattern photos for this, but I still really love it and I still really love this yarn. And while I probably am not going to be knitting a bunch of Noro garments anytime soon, I know next time I see it, I might be tempted to pick up a little bit more. I found this pattern to be extremely straightforward. I thought it was written really well, and if it was in fact translated, I thought they did a fantastic job. I think this pattern was $10, and that felt really fair to me. And this was a really nice project. It honestly flew off my needles, but I think it was just because I was so obsessed with this yarn, and I just wanted to knit with it all day, every day. So I think I finished this piece in about 5 days, but that's pretty unusual for me. Like I've maybe said before in this video, I have a very demanding job, and so it's very unusual that I am actually finishing pieces in any quick amount of time. If you've been kind of in the crochet spheres of YouTube for a while, you might recognize this one. This is the Lily Top by Passionate Kelsey. This is also knitted in just some thrifted worsted weight acrylic that I found. I suspect it was probably something like Red Heart Super Saver, but I don't know. I just really loved the color. It kind of reminds me of like an 80s ski resort. She does have a full tutorial for this one online, although I think there is a paid pattern if you prefer to see something in writing. I learned to crochet from video, and so it just sort of felt like returning to my roots a little bit. I knit this piece up because I went to my first ever rave this year. I'll put some pictures in of me wearing it. And this was honestly perfect. I have a pair of shorts that kind of have some flowers with leaves that match this color really nicely. This is a super great pattern. I mean, all of her patterns are incredibly well done. I admire her a ton as both an artist and a business person. And I think that the stuff that she comes out with is extremely professional. And this was just a total blast to crochet up. This probably took a day. It was like kind of a last minute thing. Again, I'll put some b-roll in of me wearing it because it's kind of a pain to get on, but really loved it. Really enjoyed it. Not much else to say about that one. From there, I kind of had just sort of a crochet kick again. Like once I did that, I kind of remembered how much I enjoyed it. And so these next two pieces are both crochet. They're the last kind of crochet pieces of the video. But these are just a couple of crochet bags that I made. They're made of the same thrifted mystery cotton based on the shape of the balls when I got them. I'm gonna guess it's Lily Sugar and Cream, but I'm not totally sure. I had one ball of this kind of mustardy color, one ball of the brown, and then one of the red. And both of these bags are just self-drafted by me. This is like a classic sunflower granny square. I'm sure you can find a tutorial of one online. And it's just a very standard bag construction where you make a bunch of those squares and then you attach them together and then make the little strap. These were both really fun, just really nice projects. I go to the beach once a year with my family, and both of these projects I made and then brought with me onto the beach, which these were really perfect for that. This one I attached a little charm that I got from a maker at a maker's market while I was down there. I'll see if I can find their business card. I just thought it was really cute and kind of matched the vibe. This is just like a very basic kind of, is that a double crochet? Yeah, I think it's a double or maybe a treble crochet. And then kind of this mesh, again, pretty basic as far as design goes, but just something to kind of occupy my brain where I didn't need to be attached or glued to a pattern for a really long time. Both of these bags were just a lot of fun. And again, no pattern for these, just kind of off the dome. So the next one that I knit, or the next couple of items I knit, I don't have anymore, so I'm going to put a picture up of the Ravelry page because I unfortunately also did not get a photo, but I did make 2 of the classic cabled hats this year. These are like an extra bulky kind of cable knit hat, as the name says, very classic looking, super fun to knit up. I made one of these for my grandma with leftover yarn from a project that I will talk about a little bit later because it took me a lot longer to make than the hat did, but her favorite color is red, and so this was kind of a bright red cable hat for her, and I actually do have a picture of me wearing it when I was trying to show off the additional project, but I'll wait to insert it when I talk about that project. And then I also made one for my best friend's birthday in just sort of like a goldenrod mustard yellow because she loves that color. These, again, are really great gift knits. It is a free pattern as well, so you're not spending anything. You're not taking that risk if you're trying to knit somebody something where you aren't sure if the pattern will work out. But I thought this pattern was written really well, very easy to read, and it was very fun to do some cables. I have one work in progress that has some cables, but it is a much more complicated cable than these ones are, and so it was really cool to just kind of get some of those basics down. And I think the pattern is so well written. I would absolutely recommend this pattern. I think I got really lucky this year with patterns in general. Most of the ones I used were extremely clear, were very easy to read, and you hear horror stories, I think, a lot about free patterns, and I'm sure there are some bad ones, and there absolutely have been some patterns that I've pulled up and thought, no, like either I'm too much of a beginner for this, or I don't understand what they're saying here, or maybe the pattern is written a little poorly, but every pattern that I used this year was written really well. And I think that might be because I am a little picky, I am very driven by data, and I spend a lot of time vetting my patterns. I will talk a little bit in another video about my 2026 knitting plans, but you'll see my process and it's pretty extensive, so I try very hard to only purchase patterns that are very well written and pretty well received. So I have a slot here for the additional 4 other Carmen balaclavas, which I knit for Christmas this year. I think I still have a picture of the 3 I gave my coworker for her and her 2 young sons. These are all the Carmen balaclava. Again, it was a Carmen balaclava 2025. I love this pattern. I will probably knit more of these next year too, until every person in my family has a Carmen balaclava and they're all tired of Carmen balaclavas. The last one, because I did knit 4 more, is for my sister's girlfriend. I don't think I have a picture of it, and I'm very sad because it was actually my first time trying intarsia color work, so I'll see if I can find a picture of her wearing it or if she'd be willing to take a picture for me, and if I can, I'll put it here. Basically, I modified an intarsia chart from Anna Hoosman from her Intarsia Knits book. I would really like to knit something a little more substantial from this. Basically, I took a pattern from her Looking for Treasures tee and kind of modified it so that I could put it on this balaclava in some really bold colors because, like me, my sister's girlfriend is also very into very loud colors, and it was such a blast to knit. So I'll see if I can get a picture from her and I'll put it in so that you can see it. Okay, we're getting close to the end. There are just a couple more left. This next one is also a free pattern. This is the Autumn Hippie Shawl by Christy Houghton. This is a really lovely triangle kind of scarf or shawl that has got these really fun textures in it. Oh, let me make sure I'm showing you the right side. I wasn't. Sorry about that. All right, it's got these really lovely textures in it. So each stripe kind of has a different sort of character to it. And there is just a little bit of lace in one of the stripes, and then kind of the autumn portion of it are these really gorgeous little lace leaf motifs. I love them. They're so pretty and they were so fun to make. Again, just another extremely well-written free pattern. It does have instructions for tassels, but I did not put them on there because I was working with very limited quantities of yarn for this. I'll put in a picture of the yarn that I had for this. I believe it's called Art Yarns. It was some beautiful merino wool that I picked up from a secondhand craft store, and I had a really great time making this. I called mine a Halloween hippie shawl because it is sort of Halloween colors, and I was knitting this right around Halloween. But it is just a really lovely little triangular scarf pattern that I really, really enjoy. And this yarn, I mean, was gorgeous. I think it's local to Washington State, which is where I'm located, but hand dyed or hand painted and just really beautiful. I mean, this blocked so nicely. It was all like bunched up from my very, very tight tension. And when I blocked it out, I swear this thing grew like 5 times bigger. And I love it because now it's a little more covering. And yeah, I had a great time with this pattern too. We're getting into the big ones. This is where my knitting game stepped up pretty significantly, or maybe just my knitting hubris. I took on a couple of really big projects right at the end of the year. Well, to be perfectly honest, a lot of these were kind of on the needles at the same time as a lot of those accessories and smaller projects, where I would kind of use the smaller projects as a way to get my hands off of some of these more ambitious knits, because I really needed breaks, or sometimes like those little small dopamine hits when these ones were just taking so long. But this is probably my favorite thing that I've knit this year, and maybe my favorite thing I've knit ever. But this is the Whale Sweater by Lincoln Newman. I am so surprised that I don't see this pattern out in the knitting world on Instagram very often. I mean, I'm sure it's out there, I just haven't seen it, because this is such a beautiful stranded colorwork sweater. I knit mine in a combination of Lion Brand Wool Ease. This is like their tweed, so if you look at it, you can see it is sort of a wheat color, but it's got little occlusions, little pieces of brown and black in it, which I really love. And then this blue color was also was some yarn I picked up at a garage sale, actually. It is actually a pretty nice brand. I'll put it up when I look through my notes again, because I still can't remember what this one is called. I have such a bad time with yarns, especially because so many of them I buy don't have labels, and so I'm not always completely up and up on what yarn they are. But actually, I think this one might be Brown Sheep Company in this gorgeous like periwinkle blue color. Again, this piece is probably my favorite of this year. I completely loved making it. I completely love the way it looks. I'll put it on. Sorry if you can hear my mic. It's so warm. But this is it on. You can kind of see the pattern a little bit more. It's got this really lovely kind of motif up and down the sides. I will say I did find this project pretty challenging. I actually took a class for stranded colorwork at the Oregon Flock and Fiber Festival as well. And that was really helpful for when I was taking on this piece, but it has some really, really long floats inside of it. As you can probably tell, I mean, the whales themselves are almost, like you could almost make these in tarsia, right? They're so large of stitches. I think it maybe goes up to like 20 stitches sometimes in between. So you can see I have a lot of caught floats in there, and they're not always the neatest, I'm not gonna lie. This is a bottom-up construction. This was my first bottom-up sweater, and honestly, I enjoy them. I know a lot of people really don't like knitting them, but I think it works just fine. It works just fine. It's got this really pretty raglan detail. This was another thing I really loved about this pattern. And I knit, I think the size medium/large in this one. You know, actually that might be why I don't see this one a lot on Instagram. Now that I think about it, I don't know if this pattern is particularly size inclusive, and that might be the reason that I don't see it a lot. But I think most knitters, and I'll say this, you know, not as a plus size knitter, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I find that a lot of plus size knitters are technically much better knitters because they've had to modify patterns so much that I think this one would be an easy one to modify. You could just kind of add in some additional striping. This one, again, very well written. This is not a free pattern, it is a paid pattern, but I believe at least a portion of the proceeds go to ecological causes. So that felt pretty nice. But that is my whale sweater. Yeah, probably my favorite thing I've knit all year. I really, really love this one. And that honestly brings me right into my next one. You can see I went in one and out the other. And yes, I am considering this finished. There are some ends that need to be waved in, but this is the Nordic Mix by Laura Delgard. I fell in love with Laura Delgard's patterns this year. I think this is an absolutely gorgeous pattern. And I gotta say, in comparison to the whale sweater, this one knits up so fast. I was completely hooked on this pattern. I've heard the term popcorn knitting thrown around occasionally in kind of the YouTube knitting space, and this is popcorn knitting. I mean, I just wanted to get to the next session. I just wanted to get to the next part. I just wanted to get to the next spot in the pattern. I completely loved it. I will say though, the reason this is not my favorite one, despite the fact that I actually think aesthetically I like it a little bit more than the whale sweater, is that this sweater, maybe you can't tell, was a complete failure on my end. This was my biggest learning experience of the entire year. So I originally intended to knit this pattern up for my boyfriend, who is a much taller, larger man. You can maybe tell from this that this looks it looks a little small for a particularly tall man, and it is. I did a gauge swatch for this, like I promise I did a gauge swatch, but still, this came out like 2 sizes smaller than it was supposed to, and I'm not really sure why. I have a couple of theories, one being that it might be possible that my tension is a lot tighter knitting in the round than it is knitting flat, and that's something I've thought a lot about with gauge swatches, is that a lot of the things I gauge swatch for are not knit in panels, and so it feels kind of weird because I don't think my tensions are the same in between knitting flat and knitting in the round. But I do think it made a really beautiful fabric. It is pretty dense though, so maybe that's evidence that maybe that's evidence that my tension is really different. I knit this up in Drops Alaska. This took so many balls of Drops Alaska, but Drops Alaska is a very affordable yarn, and I gotta say, while knitting with it, it felt very rustic. Now that I've blocked this sweater about 20 times trying desperately to make it fit my boyfriend, it is really quite soft. Again, I have a very high tolerance, I think, for knits, but this is one of the softest 100% wool that I've used, and I really, really like it. So the other reason this one is a massive failure is that the construction of this is that it's knit in the round and then steeked for the sleeves. So this was my second adventure in steeking, and I went in thinking, I've steeked once before, it turned out fine, this is gonna be great, I don't need to look up a tutorial again. And that's how I got this sleeve, which is horrible. I mean, this whole thing almost completely unraveled and it was terrifying. So you can see, like, I desperately tried to salvage it, and it's got this really weird little edge, and there's kind of some fibers sticking out from it that I'm gonna need to poke in with a felting needle, probably. Thank God this is 100% wool, but yeah, it looks really ugly. And so I decided, since this is for myself now, I'm just gonna declare that the back, and I will continue to wear this. Although again, I have not weaved in the ends, and the reason for that is that I'm actually making my boyfriend a second one in the real size, assuming that my gauge stays the same. And it feels really bad having promised him the sweater to finish it and like wear it around while his is still on my needles. But that one has also been really, really fun to knit again. I had been dreading it because it felt like, oh, I failed so badly. Like, I made a whole sweater. It is completely the wrong size, and it's got this ugly, weird steek mark on it. Like, I don't want to do this again. And then I started knitting the second one and was like, oh, that's right. The process of this knit is just so much fun. It's so much fun. Like, if you're thinking of casting this on, I absolutely would. And while obviously my foibles prove that this is maybe not like a true beginner sweater, I think the color work itself absolutely is. The floats in this one are really quite short. There's almost no point where you need to even like catch them. You can just stretch them and have them be fine. And I think that's way easier. And I will say about the Drops Alaska, this blocked so flat. I had some rippling for sure in this, but I can't see any weird tension in this at all. Like, it just completely stretched flat, and I think it looks so nice. Again, I'll put in some footage of me wearing it. The only real modification I made besides completely destroying the steek sleeve unintentionally is that I did not knit as much height on the collar here. You usually knit it up even higher to kind of a funnel neck. And that was mostly because while I was knitting this, it felt very rustic, and I was a little nervous that it staying on my neck was going to be really itchy. But now that it's blocked out significantly and become significantly softer, I maybe would have just knit the full funnel neck up. But yes, that is my Drops Alaska Nordic mix. Loved this one, loved this pattern, would knit again, and am knitting again. And now we're at actually the very last thing that I knit in 2025. And that was the pattern that I was alluding to for my grandma. This was actually one of the most special knits that I've ever done in my life. But my grandmother was an extremely avid knitter. She used to knit all of the time. Her mother used to knit all of the time. And I went down to see her this year, and she kind of took me through the last of her knitting stash, the last books she had, the last whips that she had, and even a whip, the very last project that my great-grandmother knit on. And I would really love to do a kind of a project vlog video where I take you through finishing that, because it is kind of my dream and my goal to finish that sweater. It's a little baby cardigan. It's very, very cute. But the problem is that my great-grandmother was an absolute maverick. I have the pattern that she used, and she basically threw it completely out the window and knit it completely differently. So it's like a top-down raglan, and instead she's knitted in panels, and she's knitting the sleeves flat and two at a time, or maybe, no, I think flat and two at a time, which it's taking me a little while longer than I thought it was going to be to wrap my head around how exactly she did it. But Anyways, my grandmother, the last project that she tried to finish was this knit blanket. This is from a Vogue magazine, I think from 2011, 2012. Yeah, winter 2011, 2012. This is a stockinette blanket by Veronica Mano that has this really lovely kind of lace trim along the edge. And so I almost feel like it's a little bit of stolen valor for me to include this in my knits this year, because my grandma did like all of the monotonous parts. She actually knit the entire stockinette panel before giving it to me. And so all I had to do was knit this really lovely lace pattern on the side. And I don't have the blanket with me. I gave it to her. It was sort of the perfect timing to give her this blanket because it was made out of really chunky Lion brand Thick and Quick. And so it was really helpful to kind of keep her warm in the hospital. So it's with her. She's okay now, but she just had a couple of health scares right around the end of the year. But I do have some photos of me kind of wearing it, showing it off to her before I sent it off to her. So that was a really, really special project, and that was my last knit of 2025. So thank you all so much for kind of coming along with me as I talk through my knits. I feel like as I was talking about them, I found myself kind of thinking more and more about what I've accomplished this year and sort of what I want to do in the next coming years. I did a little bit of data crunching that I sort of teased at the beginning of the video, but I did kind of want to just do like a knitting breakdown of what it was that I had done. So I'll pop some graphics up on the screen, but I thought this was just really interesting. I knit 23 total pieces this year, and of those 23 pieces, 15 were accessories, 6 were garments, and 2 were blankets. Again, a blanket and a half. We'll say a blanket and a half, but it's 2 for the purposes of my chart. I was really surprised with how many accessories I actually knit. I feel like I spent a lot more time knitting garments this year, and to see that number only be 6 felt kind of low. But what I realized as I was looking through these numbers is that if you really counted up how many sweaters I knit this year, it was probably more like 16. But, and I'll talk about this in another video sometime, I knit and completely unraveled something like 6 or 7 sweaters this year because I was just so ready to jump into knitting and didn't really know what I was doing, and learned the hard way about gauge, and learned the hard way about gauge swatches, and learned the hard way about blocking and yarn weight, and just kind of all of those things that you're figuring out when you're brand new. And to be perfectly honest, I would still call myself a pretty new knitter. But yes, so I really only did knit 6 garments this year, but it just felt like significantly more. But that means that about 60% of what I knit this year was accessories, and I had a blast with them. I think that they're so fun for that kind of short-term reward center of your brain. I really enjoyed them, and I knit a lot of gift knits this year as well. So the next kind of metric that I looked at was how many of my patterns were free and how many of them were paid. To be completely transparent, I, for example, got that Vogue knitting book from my grandmother. So I still counted it as a paid pattern because you would have had to buy the magazine to get the pattern, but I did not actually pay for it. And the one other kind of strange one in this list is technically the balaclava that I used the Anna Hoosman pattern for. I counted as free because the Carmen balaclava is free, but I did pay for this book. So you probably, if you were going to do the same thing, you would maybe count that as a paid pattern. I'm not sure. But as you can see from this chart that I made, the majority of the patterns I knit this year were free. And again, I know I already talked about sort of my philosophy with this, but I felt like I got so lucky with free patterns, and I would love to make a video in the future just talking about my philosophy with free patterns and kind of giving some recommendations of free patterns that I'd really like to try that I think are probably written really, really well. So the next thing that I did was I broke down the accessories and the garments into categories because I was just really interested to see, how many of each kind I knit. And so the accessories, probably to nobody's surprise at this point, is dominated by balaclavas. I made 5 of them this year, and again, I just really love them, especially when it gets really cold here. I love wearing them. I love gifting them. It's gotten to the point where I can just make these so quickly. So I did make a lot of balaclavas. I also made quite a few hats. I would say about 25% of the accessories I knit were hats, and that was beanies, and then the beret as well. But I had a lot of fun knitting with hats, and I will say I found a lot of joy in knitting small circumference this year. So it is something I'd like to carry forward at least a little bit, but I'd like to transition, I think, a little more to socks, which, as you can see on here, socks, shawls, and mittens, and scarves. There's only a single data point for this graph. So I just did one of each of those, and then I did the 2 crochet bags. So that kind of makes up the accessories that I made this year. And then finally, I also did one for garments. This was maybe a little silly to do because there were only 6 of them, and I think you can tell pretty easily what happened. I made 2 sweaters and 1 of everything else. But I think just looking at this graph, and even the accessories one, really made me appreciate how broad my knitting was this year. I didn't really get too sucked into a single type of knit, outside of maybe the balaclavas. I was really trying everything, and I think I find myself being really proud of that. I like that I got a lot of experience doing a lot of things, and now I have a much better idea of what I like, what I don't like, what is fast, what is slow, and I would love to just try even more in the next year. Again, I want to put out a 2026 knitting goals video, so I won't bore you here with all the details, but let's just say I am looking forward to 2026 so much, being a little bit, maybe even more ambitious. There's a pattern I've been working up to for a while that I'd really like to conquer in 2026, but also just really stick with those bold, funky colors and shapes. So with that, that is the end of my everything I knit and crocheted in 2025. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for finding me, for being right here at the very start of my YouTube journey. It means so much that anybody is watching this at all. If you have any questions about any of the patterns or the yarns that I mentioned that maybe I missed, I'm sure I missed some things, feel free to put them in the comments or send me an email. You'll see my email at the end of this video, just to let me know. You are also so welcome to send me emails about what you might want to see from this channel, or critiques, comments, criticism. I am brand new to this, and I think it really shows. I fully understand now why people use ring lights, but I didn't know that until I turned my camera on this morning. So thanks again. And just because this is my first ever video, to kind of give you an idea of what you might see if you subscribe and stick around, I have way too crazy of a job to do the kind of classic weekly podcasts, but I would really like to do some project vlogs here. I am traveling abroad this year, and I would really like to kind of talk about the yarn stores that I'm going to, because of course both trips are a little bit based around knitting. And I would also just love to do some kind of knitting commentary essays. I have so many thoughts about a lot of things going on in the knitting world, and would love to just kind of share them with someone, since I don't have a lot of in real life knitting connections. So with that, again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day, or your evening, or your afternoon, or wherever you might be, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!